Hello. Before we get to Tomer and our wonderful panel of artists talking about Threepenny Carmen, a quick note. What follows is an engaging, fascinating, and frank conversation that includes discussion of sexuality, racialized sexual violence, misogyny, and how the terrible tragedy of the Atlanta spa killings affected our performers and the show. This is such a phenomenal conversation. I hope you can partake in all of it, but it's understandable if you can't or don't want to because of those things. The particularly charged discussion of the murders begins around 9 minutes and 25 seconds and continues for about 10 minutes. We're off-ramped completely by 19 minutes and 25 seconds. We are very proud to share this conversation with you, so we couldn't just bring that on you. Okay. Thanks for joining us around the table. Here's Tomer.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Carmen Table Talk, our Threepenny Carmen Table Talk, I should say. We are here with some incredible people that are very brave to meet us at 11 a.m. We're recording this at 11 a.m. after a piano dress rehearsal yesterday. So thank you so much for being here and looking as well as you do. We are here with members of the cast and the creative team of our Threepenny Carmen, the new version of Carmen that we're creating at the Atlanta Opera under the Big Tent series. And we hope that all of you will be able to see it, if not live, then in our Spotlight Media. So with us today, we have Tom Key, who's playing Lila Spastia and also co-wrote the dialogue with me. Jorge Parodi, our maestro, who is conducting the show and created this version along with me of the Threepenny Carmen. We have our main diva, it's Meg Marino, who's singing Carmen, her role debut. And we have Trey Smager, the one and only hulking tenor, who is singing Don Jose and is a company member, just like Meg Marino is. And a part of our discussion today is going to be about Carmen, but also about the Big Tent series, because both Trey and Meg were in our previous productions in the Tent series. They were actually the stars of our production of Pagliacci. They did a show together already. So kicking this off, I'd like to start with a quote that is the inspiration for all of us this season. You guys have heard me say that many times. I'm going to say it one more time, that the motto for the season has been a quote by Kurt Weill. And that quote is, if the boundaries of opera cannot accommodate the theater of our time, then those boundaries must be broken. Tom Key, as you walk into the Big Tent, how do you feel that quote holds up?
I think that we are at the tip of the spear at accommodating, adapting to, evolving to the art form that is a coalescence of all of the basic elements of storytelling, where we move past and explode beyond theater, opera, dance, music, to tell a story, inviting everyone to share their strengths and maximize our power to do together what we can't do, not just as individual artists, but as thinking of these aspects of the same art form as different and isolated from one another. So I feel like I'm on the tip of a spear of something very needful and appropriate to the moment, and powerfully creative.
Sounds good. Jorge, this is not your first visit to Atlanta. This, I think, if I count correctly, your fourth production. We did two Marias together. You did a Frida before COVID, and now you're back for this Carmen. We've been working really hard on this version for a few years. We started talking about it after a performance of Maria de Buenos Aires, Paris on Pons. Can you tell us a little bit about the process and working on this together?
Yeah, so when we were in that beautiful space in Paris of Pons in Atlanta, you told me, this will be a great place to do a Carmen in which the Carmen is actually in this kind of cabaret format, and we should try to adapt the show. So we started working on that 2 summers ago, and the original idea was that Carmen is not that we changed the settings, and now is not in a square in Seville, but actually in a bar. So Carmen becomes a performer, and that's her main job. Let's put it that way. And Jose is not a soldier anymore, but rather a policeman that comes to the bar. And with that in mind, we reconfigure all the numbers of the show, very much so. I mean, it's if you know the normal order of Carmen, this is very, very, very different. And the point is that there are a lot of moments in Carmen that feels like little showstoppers. And in fact, Carmen has enormous showstoppers, which is great. All together with this incredible dramatic relationship between Jose and Carmen. And so we put those two ideas together, and we combine the showstopper numbers with this strong, dramatic, faithful story. So we tried to figure out how it worked. We did a first ordering, and we have an idea, and then we figured out that there was some issues that we needed to solve to make the story more cohesive and much more sensible. So it was a process of back and forth in terms of where we put this number, how we reinterpret the text. In fact, one thing that we should mention to the audience is that the original text is kept. That we didn't change any words. We just trim and readapt the text into this version, and it totally makes sense. You will see the translation that is a bit of a, it's not a literal translation, but it's a very close translation of what's being said. But we didn't change any of the original, yet we reinterpret everything in a totally new take. And then when you do the staging, Tomer, you not only reinterpret the text, but you give us a totally different a totally deeper reading of all those texts, and it was amazing to see how deep these characters go.
It's interesting, the evolution of this piece, because it started from wanting to do it in this specific venue, Paris en Pence, which, by the way, since we wanted to do it then, since 2019, it has been burned, unfortunately, to the ground. And when we were not able to do it, whether we wanted it or not. It's such a tragedy because it was such a magnificent place. But then we kind of shelved that idea, and then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we looked at doing a piece that will be the most popular piece, the most infectious and seductive musically. And what came to mind was obviously Carmen. But the problem with Carmen is you can't do it in COVID days. You don't want to do an opera that lasts 3 hours with 80 people on stage, 60 people in the pit, dozens of kids, chorus, toreador, picadors, matadors, procession. And so what we were forced to do was to take the piece and tell it in a 90-minute version that will feature flamenco, and take a grand opera and strip it of the grand operatic elements from 4 huge acts into 4 scenes. And basically we can tell that story in a very simple way. One is boy meet girl. Scene 2, girl and boy have trouble. Scene 3, girl meets another boy. Other boy gets jealous. Scene 4, bad things happen. Now, talking about bad things, a few weeks ago, not too far from where we were performing, an angry white man killed at least 6 women. And here we are doing a show about an angry white man who kills a woman. How did that color our interpretation? How did that color your thinking? And I'd like to start from the girl who is actually embodying Carmen. Meg Marino, what is going on through your mind as you think about what has happened not too far from us recently?
Well, we can't ignore it. It just keeps happening. It happened when this opera was originally written, and however many years later, it's still happening. It happened while we were in rehearsal one night or one day, we all emerged from the room not realizing what had gone on just miles away from us. And we could choose to just take the easy choice and just make our opera be Carmen. Or we could actually lean into it and help people to have an experience that might be cathartic, or that might make them think a little differently, change their mind. For me, it really, the card aria is the one that really, how do I say it? It doesn't matter how you move through the world. You can be a great person. You can have people who care for you and look out for you. But some dude could walk in one day and decide he's having a bad day and take it out on you. And that could be a total stranger. It could be your father. It could be your lover. And I think that's an important part of the story to tell. So trying to be honest and to honor their memory and to honor the trauma that the town is going through right now, dealing with it.
Yeah. I feel like it really colored and changed the way your interpretation and Trey's interpretation was. Carmen is a piece that is very fraught with mannerism and shallow interpretation sometimes, because it's very easy to go in that direction of, here comes the sexy girl, she's seducing everybody, she has a problem with this guy, she wants to be free, and it can remain very distant from us. And I feel like you took this and decided to really show something contemporary about this girl. And I think the audience is really connecting with you through the whole show because of that. And going to the other side of the spectrum, playing the villain in this case, or the guy who's committing a passion crime, right? Because there's two ways to look at everything. Is Trey Smager, how did what happened here recently influence the way you interpreted this role this time around?
Well, I think that it showed me in a certain way that when certain things that Jose says that really come across, and I think that the main thing is that Jose, by the end of the show, both our version and the real version, he basically views Carmen as his property, and he views her as lesser than himself, and almost treats her as this thing that is, although she is a woman standing in front of him, she is an abstract idea of his salvation, of his recovery. And I think that the violence that happened in Atlanta was a brutal reminder of the idea that men sometimes get this objectivity in their brains, particularly about women that they find attractive. And we are easily able to subject them to things because we view them as an object. And Jose is certainly no different. And it's much easier to commit violence when you don't look at a person like a person, And I think that because he has this abstract idea of her, and this is something that I thought about when we discussed it in the room that night after we found out what happened, that I just thought about the fact that he can't look at her and view her as a person like him. For him, she's something different. Maybe he says to himself that she is greater than him in a way and represents something greater, but I think that and in general, that men need to recognize a little bit more of the humanity in women, and that is what leads to a lot of this abhorrent violence, is that men can't move past the objectivity.
So let me ask you a follow-up question. So many times in opera, the people that you interpret are not necessarily all the time heroes or people that you want to portray. From Pinkerton, which you are yet to sing, to Canio, which you have sung. How do you deal with that? Like, is it difficult to sing that as opposed to singing somebody that is easy to identify with, Tamino? I don't know, somebody with a beautiful hair and everything goes well. What do you do?
Yeah, so the answer for me is yes. I mean, there is no way to throw yourself in a role like Jose or Canio or Grimes or any of these guys who commit violence and kind of view themselves as me against everyone. I find it very difficult. And there, especially the first time that I did Jose, this time I'm a little more calm. But last time I found I was just in a bad mood after the show, because everyone has their own acting technique, but I have to kind of say sentences in my head and keep myself refreshed. And when you're playing a character like Don Jose, those are not nice sentences. They're, you know, and sometimes you have to allow yourself, you always want to keep it, you know, simmering and never boiling over. But I think that the best advice I ever got about it was that, you know, portrayal and the actual feeling, they are not the same thing. And so the more that I can think about how do I portray and not how do I actually feel, how do I make myself feel jealous to the point that I would commit violence, that number one, it doesn't read as well as just trying to portray it. And number two, you're going to be a sad person at the end of that show, because those feelings, they take something out of you, and they deplete, at least me, they deplete me emotionally, but also physically. You feel exhausted.
That's an amazing observation. I just it's something that I've been thinking a lot about, from like Scarpia to other villains. There's so many villains in opera, but the question is always like, do you think that they're fully villains, or is there a part of them that you understand? And I think that if we judge them as actors, as singers, as directors, we are doing disservice to the story. And one of my favorite quote that I think about often is that the hero of a tragedy, in order to interest us, should be neither wholly guilty nor wholly innocent. You know who said that? Napoleon, who is the quintessential person who is, you know, very, very divided in terms of who he was. Guilty, villain, hero. And he said that after he saw a play about the Templars. So I often think about that as we're doing all those shows. And I think the biggest mistake that a singer can do is go, I hate Pinkerton, or I hate Don Jose, or I hate Carmen, or because then that's humanity. All of us have dark, all of us have light. And our role is just to tell those stories. Now, going back to Meg, talk about interpretation. Arguably, it's the most difficult role in the repertoire. From the moment you show up, you're supposed to be this smoky, sexy broad that everybody's attracted to, huge pressure to do a good job, not only vocally, but also physically, self-esteem, security, confidence, all the things that as human beings, we don't have always complete control of. How has it been for you?
It has been a simultaneously very joyous experience for me, if I can even say that about something so dark. But also I've had a lot of growing pains, all very necessary, you know, for just being the very best that we can be. I had spent the majority of my career playing children and magical creatures at 5 feet tall and like kind of a wiry individual. So that's been, and actually I played gender fuck bending Beppe with Trey when we did Pagliacci. And
that word was fach, right? Is that what you said? Fach.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
yeah. Just clarifying that which means a voice, right?
Yeah, which is type, the type you fit into your little box.
Yeah, fach bending.
Fach bending. Oh my gosh. Thank you for correcting that.
No, it's not a correction. I'm just clarifying.
Well, diction is very important, in the theater and in opera. It's been a bit of a learning curve at times. Also, the last time that I was, doing a center of the stage role was Cenerentola, Rossini's Cinderella. And that, I think the last time I sang that was 2017. And so I've done a lot of like secondary principal roles recently and things like that. So having to kind of recalibrate myself to, you're it, baby, do it. I grew up doing theater as a kid. Last time that happened was, back in Annie Land, like legitimately carrying a real title like that. Because Cenerentola is also a very ensemble heavy show. And this particular version of Carmen, even, I'm like shot right out of a cannon, and it's 2 arias back to back. Then I get 5 minutes off, and then it's another aria and a quick moment to run around the back of the stage, change my costume. I'm out for, the whole like yodely la 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 section, which I've started to call it that. So it's been a learning curve in that way, and also to just, getting past the idea of, we've all seen that Carmen where we're watching either it looks like a bratty 16-year-old who didn't get a BMW for her birthday and she's angry with her daddy, right? Or it's like, hey everybody, look at how sexy I am. This is what sex is, yeah. And I just, none of those portrayals, no knocking it, because dude, now that I've done some of this, I understand how difficult it is to try and figure out how one fits into this piece as this iconic woman from operatic history. But I also really was worried that she'd look like she got what she deserved in the end, because we've also seen that Carmen too, where you're like, finally he killed her, like she just taunts him all night, and that's horrible. That's a horrible feeling, and I am admitting that. Here I am admitting it to our call and to the internet, anyone who watches this later. But I wanted her to be a real person, because she is a real person, and we all have all those different parts of ourselves, and it's really taken me a while to fully embrace that and accept that really sexiness is confidence. And if you're confident in yourself and you feel yourself and you just lean into it, that's beautiful and magnetic. And I don't know. It's a long roundabout way of getting there,
but you're right. It's not about the color of one's eyes if they're sexy.
Or the shape of your body, or the color of your skin, or if you call yourself, I am a woman, or sometimes I feel masculine, whatever. You embrace yourself fully and just let it out. And that's one of the things that I've learned personally from Carmen as well recently, is just live in the present. And there's no past, there's no future. It's only now. You don't know when you're going to pull that card, and those cards are going to keep falling. That's the only thing we know, right? You're always going to have cards. So it's not, and even sometimes how you play them doesn't matter. So just do it. Just be who you are and fuck it.
Fuck it all. I think that what you said is so important in terms of empowering, like confidence, empowering women, empowering people that are struggling with body image or with how they feel about themselves. And that kind of interpretation that comes from confidence and from knowing who you are, I think is such an important angle, as opposed to saying, oh, you have to look like that or weigh that amount in order to be attractive. So thank you for saying that. Maestro, you had something you wanted to say.
Yes, I wanted to add to what Megan said, because I wanted to point it out even before with Trace mentioning it. Sometimes because the show is written by a bunch of men, both the librettos and the original book and the composer, always the original Carmen is borderline justify the violence, which I think is a big problem. It almost feels like, well, there's always, and I understand that Jose has to feel that he has the right to do it, or he wants to do it, but in a way that is described, it's dangerous that way, and I hate violence of any kind. So I always feel like that is the worst crime, that is someone kills someone, right? If, of all the possible crimes that human can do, that is the worst. And the original version, it goes very finely, as you say, Megan, almost feels like there is a deserving quality of the fate, which I think is not right of any. There's no justification. But I believe that in this version, and especially the way you, Tomer, you guide the both Carmen and Jose, it feels a little more fortuitous and less justifiable, which I think is very good, because we should not. I understand that Trey has to have the right motivation, but there's no justification for an action like Jose's. And in this version, it feels very very unfair, which I think is very good. And also, because we're in Atlanta and what happened, we need to point out that unfairness, it is the name of the game. It is not right.
Yeah, absolutely. Maestro, since you are speaking about the piece, can you tell us a little bit about the orchestra adaptation? About what is it like with the reduced orchestration for the big tent? How is it different than performing in a pit? How many members do you have in the orchestra?
So everything is very different. We are in this high-tech world that so we are in a tent of our own. We have our own tent that is sitting behind, and we are connected by all these cables. And I see I have two cameras showing me all areas of the stage. The singers have 3 monitors with the camera on me, looking at me conducting the orchestra. Everything is piped and mic'd. I hear the sound from the from the stage, and they hear the sound of the orchestra. So it's really quite a feat of high tech. And yesterday we have our first rehearsal, in which I was in the orchestra tent, and it was actually surprisingly smooth, and it was really. These guys are the best followers, and they really were with me all throughout, and it was very exciting. This orchestra is reduced. We cannot have all the people that it is scored for, so we built an orchestration for string quintet, flute, clarinet, and I added the guitar also, which is not in the original orchestration. But I thought, since we wanted to do a flamenco version, we needed that quintessential Spanish sound, which is a guitar. That is not too obvious. It's not that you will hear a guitar piece in the orchestra, but it's there, and suddenly it comes out, and it gives that flavor of Spanish, which is in a way like our production. You hear the flamenco in a setting that is not really Spanish. Same thing, you hear the guitar in a setting orchestration that is not essentially Spanish either. So it's a bit of mix. But we have all kind of colors with the strings, the flute, the guitar, and also we wanted to create the sounds on the stage, so you will hear a very active and raucous stage, which is good. Usually we try to produce no sound on stage except for the singing, but in this case we have guitars, we have panderos, we have people clicking the floor, making noise and screaming. I think we wanted to create a new world also in the sound department, so that is part of the things that we have conceived for this version.
A part of our process was learning a new word, diegetic.
Oh, yeah.
Diegetic.
Exactly. You told me. I didn't know that was. Yeah.
I didn't either until I did this, which is, there's the sound that comes from the orchestra, and then there's a diegetic sound that comes from the stage. So if people are clapping or stomping or drumming on stage, that is called diegetic sound. And now all of us know what it means.
I know. In fact, we have in this version, and not in the original, we have a phone call. So the phone call, it is coming from the stage. It's not like a sound from the orchestra, but this is a good example of the stage, the blurring the line between the stage, the pit, and the audience, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure that people who are looking for a traditional Carmen are going to be thrilled about the fact that there is a cell phone in it. Now, talk about traditional Carmens. We have a very untraditional way of telling that story. It is told to us by this guy, Lila Spastia. And the idea that we had in terms of the interpretation was that we wanted to create something that would have like pop culture references. So as we designed this world and we wrote the text, we wanted to have a combination of Quentin Tarantino meets Pedro Almodovar, meets The Sopranos, meets Peaky Blinders. Now you know what my influences are when it comes to film and TV. And for that reason, Lila Spastia, the owner of the tavern, is telling this bloody and hot-blooded and violent story. Tom, you are playing not only Lila Spastia in this production, but you're also playing the polar opposite, Mr. Rogers, the narrator of Threepenny Opera. How's it going? Like, what is it like to portray those two characters that are completely opposite?
It's fantastic. It's part of what drew me to the opportunity when you called me last December. I've always wanted to do rep where you prepare two or more different roles at the same time and perform them alternate nights. And not only is this an opportunity to do that, but like you said, they're polar opposites. And to add on to some of the wonderfully and insightful things that Meg and Trey have already brought up, I had a great high school teacher who changed my life about steering me toward acting as a profession. And one thing she said to me when I was in high school was that the easiest thing an actor has to do is memorize lines. And I was about 35 years old before I could begin to understand what she meant by that. And I think the real challenge is the vulnerability of being an actor. I have come to trust that acting is not pretending to be someone I'm not, but it's revealing who I am as is appropriate to the character in the script. And Lila Spastia and Fred Rogers both abide within me. And as you indicated too, the line between good and evil goes through every human heart. So there's a unifying, it's cathartic, it's stretching, it's terrifying, and it's exhilarating. That both characters on one level, one can seem hardened and selfish and uncaring and greedy, and the other can seem out of touch and avoiding responsibility with intentional ignorance of reality, and yet at their core there is that mysterious eternal quality that every human being has, which we approach with awe. And I can't judge a character as being greater or lesser than myself and portray him, reveal him at the same time. So I've gotten real intimate and embracing with my inner Lelis Pastia, and also with my Fred Rogers. And I've been crying a lot and laughing a lot. And coming in, and on another level, I got a gig on a film in February, but spending, a couple of months doing opera and working with the Atlanta Opera Company, going from pandemic lockdown to boom, I'm in the middle of a company. I've just been knocked out at what it's like to be around human beings working together on a creative project, and for them to to let these polar opposites emerge and say, this is part of who I am. And I believe that that's what makes theater works, that we recognize ourselves in this story, that every human being is particular and things just don't happen randomly, but there's a plot. And if there's meaning to this person's life, that means there might be to mine too. So I'm on all cylinders being human and showing up, and coming into these rehearsals and these singers with their superpowers has been awesome. And letting Lelis and Fred Rogers abide with them for the purposes of telling this story is a fantastic adventure.
Well, yeah, right. I mean, every time Tom Key speaks, I feel like we need a transcript of what he said so that we can keep it somewhere where we can quote it, and definitely applaud, because that's what makes him Tom Key. Thank you, Tom.
Sure.
One thing you mentioned is this collective experience of being together as a part of a company. And we have with us two wonderful artists that have been a part of this company from day one, part of our company players. And the experience that we had in the fall and the experience that we have in the spring is absolutely, to me, polar opposite. Like, I still feel that it's very challenging to deal with all the protocols, singing with masks, barriers, being in a periactoid that has a vinyl barrier, having the orchestra in the other tent, not seeing the maestro, not seeing your partner's face, not being able to touch them without being worried about protocols. But spring is here. We're vaccinated, right? That's an important part. This company is now almost completely vaccinated. Today, we're getting our second vaccines. The future is hopefully brighter. But Trey and Meg, as you think about this past season, you've been with the Atlanta Opera for this whole season. How has this been? It feels like an epic journey to me. How does it feel for you? Ladies first.
Well, at the risk of sounding too dramatic, it's been a lifeboat. It's been amazing. We're some of the few lucky people who have found a way to get to do the thing we love with people who we love, and to bring that to people who are dying to have those experiences as well right now. We're also starved for it. And in the fall, we know a lot more now about how the virus does what it does. But in the fall, there were still discoveries being made. So we were, being super crazy extra, locked down and super cautious. And now we're still being super cautious, but we have that much more science on our side helping us with our protocols, and things have been slightly adjusted. But it was in the fall, walking into it, Michael, my husband Michael, and I had been living at our home. Well, we moved to Columbia, South Carolina at the end of the summer, but we spent most of the beginning months of the pandemic in our home in Colorado, which is naturally socially distant. So we were a lot more spread out. We weren't wearing masks all day long, not because we were anti-maskers, but because we didn't need to, because we were outside all the time, and we were with a certain group of people constantly, and we were all being extra cautious. And so it was definitely a shock to the system to walk into that rehearsal room and be like, oh my gosh, here we are in a smaller space with more people who I'm not used to being around. And then adding on to that, the extra layers of extra trust, not just the kind of trust that one needs in order to really create good theater, right? To be able to just do the thing and try new things, and like, I'm gonna look like a crazy person and we'll see if this works, like all those layers were there. But then on top of it were, okay, at the time I was also playing a melodeon. So I was putting this little tube in my mouth. So I was like, okay, like crazy about like what kind of sanitizer tastes the least offensive, and like making sure, because I was constantly basically putting my hands in my mouth, so there were all of those extra things swirling around as well, and being scared about that, and then having, like I said, that extra trust of your actual physical care and body. It really, I feel like we all really bonded in a way that you don't normally when you're just in for 2 to 6 weeks doing a production, the way that we used to do things pre-COVID times. And that's been really wonderful. It's been wonderful to be on a home team and to get to play Tiny Tim to Bob Cratchit over there in our, in Pagliacci. And then now it's like, crazy boyfriend girlfriend stuff, and to get to explore those relationships in, as Tom so eloquently put it, in a truthful way with someone who I've developed a real friendship and working relationship with, like my new favorite scene partner, Trey. Boom, I don't know. I can
Everybody's favorite.
Trey, your turn.
So when I moved to Atlanta, when Tomer called and offered me the position, my family lives in Georgia, and so I was more than thrilled to move closer to my parents and be able to be in a state that I love and just an area of the United States that I love. And I was terrified, partially because the Canyo is a difficult role, but also just because you just don't know what's going to happen. But more than that, I want to talk about how quickly and how consistently I have just been inspired by this whole process. As American singers, it is very easy to get caught up in your voice, your portrayal, what you are doing, how you are being conceived by other people. And basically from the very beginning, Atlanta Opera showed me that they were all on my team and that it would be nice if I could get on board. And I like to think that I got on board very quickly because it became about us putting on a show for the city of Atlanta, far more than personal glory or trying to get up there and do my best Corelli impression. And not only did I think that, I wanted that. And I felt that way because the opera was able to cultivate for us a safety net. They were able to keep us sustained. They were able to make us feel safe. We have a wonderful risk mitigation coordinator in the room always, who is flexible with us but keeps us safe. And coming back to Carmen, like Meg said, in the fall, we just wanted to put on a show. We were thrilled. I can't tell you how thrilled I was when it was over. It was like, oh my God, we really did 9 shows or 10 shows. That's incredible when you think about the amount of effort. And this show, I was just so excited because I knew that the team that we had, not only was everyone extremely competent and we had a good idea of how to do this, but everyone wants the same thing, which is to put on one hell of a show and hopefully help heal people and at least take their mind off of kind of the messy world state for 90 minutes. And so I'm so thrilled to be able to do this again. And the other thing is with the company players, I mean, again, American artists, we're not used to seeing the same people for 9 months. And so to get to watch Meg and Mike, these people that I admire, and when I was a young artist, this is who I wanted, this is who I was inspired by, was to get to watch these people who just got up there and they just did it, man. It was just so good. And you get to watch them do the process. You get to watch how they talk to people. It's invaluable. And it's just more than I can say inspirational. And it makes me want to work. And when you get to the tough spot and you get to your aria and you're like, I have to wear this mask and I just don't know, this mask is going to be the end of me. It's not. And you can look around the room and you just know that everyone else is pulling for you and just wants to do the same thing that you want to do, which is give people a dose of some drama, So that's been my experience.
Nicely said. Nicely said. There was mention of another performer that is not on this call, but his spirit is all over us, especially in the Meg Marino household, and that's Mike Mays. Now, Megan, you've been with Mike for a few years, but you have only performed with him once before. You definitely never kissed him on stage or really interacted with him seriously on stage. How is it to work with Mike?
Awesome. Again, kind of going off of Trey, as American singers, we don't get to actually be together very often in the same place and for an extended period of time. So to have had this opportunity to be with my husband working since middle of September, beginning of October, has been incredible. And yeah, when we first met, I was in the chorus at Des Moines Metro Opera. He was the Count in Marriage of Figaro. And I was one of the bridesmaids, and I sang Amanti Costanti around him in a little circle and put flower pots at his feet. And I was like, oh, noted, very talented, very interesting guy, both with different people at the time. So I'm very respectful of, other people's relationships, and was trying to make a failed one of my own work at the time, as was he. And and so we didn't actually get together until I think the fall of 2013, but it's been really, really nice. And usually when we've only been on gigs at the same time a couple other times aside from this, but we've never been in the same show. Like now that I'm, out of the Young Artist Program, a big kid. It's just, it's really cool to actually be in the same show and to get to do stuff and together. And usually, he does a lot of the, the dérochés and the center of the stage stuff. And I'll be, I find it, it's not knocking or judging any kind of character. I really find it's very interesting to play like the secondary principal or, someone's servant who's helping them to get through and to tell their story, like, hey girl, you're coughing. What's going on? Do you need some water? Like, like, what's this about? I'm noticing you're having some problems with your boyfriend. How can I help you? Like, I really find creating those characters to be very interesting. However, usually the shoe is on the other foot. So this is the first time where I've been Carmen and he is in a smaller role. And so recalibrating our home life and, who does what for who at what time, who's going to be the one who walks the dogs more often, things like that, has been a really fun and interesting adjustment. Also, as Trey so eloquently pointed out, oftentimes we forget that we're all on the same team and wanting to create art together. And so it's been very helpful to have him in the room, not just to work with, but also as an observer who knows me very well and knows what I can do. Who, when we get back after rehearsal at night and I, might have a crazy idea of how something went down, he'll be like, Meg, you're wrong. And let me tell you all the reasons why. And everyone loves you. And whatever you're putting out there that's in your head, it needs to, you need to let that go because that's not real. And so that's been actually extremely helpful. And I realize how lucky I am to have that set up right now.
And how lucky we are to have both of you here. Mike is not only an artistic advisor at the Atlanta Opera, but also he's a regular visitor here. I think that the roles that he was seen here before are completely different than how he will be seen this time. The roles that he sang in before are a bunch of serial killers, tormented human beings, from Sweeney Todd to Joseph Desrochers to Kaiser von Atlantis. And so to see him in this crazy Escamillo role is going to be a treat to the audience and to the community. There's one more character in the show that we haven't spoken about and that I'm in awe of, and that is the flamenco incredible dancer that we brought from New York, Sonia Ola, and her husband Ismael Fernandez, who are both in the show. Sonia Ola has a huge career choreographing the world tour of Madonna and Ricky Martin, and here she is with us under the big tent in Atlanta. Jorge, how has it been collaborating with her? Because this is something that we had as a vision from the very beginning. We wanted that element. After doing tango with Maria de Buenos Aires, we wanted flamenco and Carmen. How's it been going with her?
It's, as you say, it's a joy. When you mentioned to do a flamenco, and then you contacted her, so I had the first meeting with her and Ismael, and we were just talking about what the possibilities are, and she was extremely open. She's I do whatever you want me to do. I can dance myself. I can choreograph the other dancers. I can do a little thing. I can do a lot of things. So and she's been so accommodating and bringing a lot of personality and a lot of ideas, but actually always listening to requests and recommendations and ideas. And she's incredibly sweet and easygoing. The funny thing is that when you will see on stage, she feels like this very strong and stern and hard to get by person, but yet she's off stage. She's very, very sweet, very smiley. We talk about food and cooking all the time, and our hometowns and the cultures, and it's really sweet, very, very sweet person that lives the flamenco style. Wonderful. They are both from southern Spain, so it's where the flamenco comes from. So she is a real flamenco dancer, which has all these elements that is very, very typical of Carmen. So and again, she brings the sound from stage, from the characters, and with the castanets and the clapping and the stomping. It's just very rhythmical and adds a lot of sound and personality. And also, Tomer, you made her not just a performer but a character. She is part of the story and the personality of Carmen and the whole surrealistic, realistic kind of show. So, and she's really fantastic, and it's fun and yet strong and sweet.
Yeah, she adds so much to the show. She's such an incredible artist. And I have to say that one of the reasons I've always been drawn to opera is the fact that so many cultures are celebrated, that people from all over are coming together to do this. And in a world where so much is focused on what divides us and how we should hate the other, and ignore the fact that we have so much in common, so much more in common than what is actually dividing us. It is so refreshing to come to a rehearsal room where the flamenco dancer is from Spain, the conductor is from Argentina, the director is from Israel, the choreographer is from Venezuela, the assistant director is from Brazil, and the set designer is from Montreal, Canada. And here we are doing this show in Atlanta, Georgia, placing it in an East Texas bar, celebrating in America all those different cultures and saying to the people that are bent on dividing us that there is much more that unites us than divides us. And music and art is number one. So it's been a pleasure to meet with you guys, to work with you, and to have this conversation. I look forward to opening night. Toi, toi, toi. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you. Looking forward to see everyone in the tent.
Bye, everybody. Take
Bye.
care.